Hello everyone, I'm Cardinal Emil Johansson of the Ecumenical Order of Christ, and I'd like to bring you another news item today. And this is about a very important historical castle that is at the risk of being lost to erosion. So, let's read, shall we? Tintagel Castle is at risk of tumbling into the sea. Cornwall Fortress, where King Arthur was conceived, could be lost forever as rising seas speed up erosion of the cliffs on which it is built. Tintagel Castle is at risk of falling into the sea as a result of coastal erosion. Climate change is causing sea levels to rise and exacerbating the process. According to legend, the fortification is where King Arthur was conceived. English Heritage is fundraising to protect it and other sites from damage. A castle in Cornwall, famous for being the place of King Arthur's conception, is at risk of tumbling into the sea. According to English Heritage, sea levels are now rising at the fastest rate for nearly 3 millennia and are increasing the pace of coastal erosion to alarming levels. This is likely the result of climate change and means Tintagel Castle and other coastal sites are at risk of being lost forever. And yes, you could say it is climate change. The climate is changing. And that is, the main reason is because of the approach of Nibiru and Nemesis. English Heritage has now launched a multi-million-pound fundraising appeal to fund works to halt the damage and preserve them for future generations. Director of Estates, Rob Woodside, said, "Erosion along England's coastline is nothing new, but the rate of land loss that we have seen over the past few years is alarming, and some scenarios indicate that sea levels could increase by up to a meter by the end of the century." And here are some beautiful pictures of the English coastline. According to English Heritage, sea levels are now rising at their fastest rate for nearly 3 millennia, and is increasing the pace of coastal erosion to alarming levels. As a result, Tintagel Castle pictured and other sites the charity manages are at risk of being lost forever. And this number is pretty interesting, 3 millennia, because that is approximately, I think, the time it takes for the twin star of our star to make a full circle around. So yeah. Another beautiful picture. English Heritage said the site has always battled with erosion, with parts of the castle already falling into the sea by the 14th century. Tintagel Castle has been inhabited since the late Roman period, but it was not until the 12th century that the chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth claimed it was where King Arthur, pictured in artist's impression, was conceived. This is one example of what it could have looked like. He continued, "To give this some context, last century sea levels rose by 14 centimeters along the southern coast of England. Climate change is accelerating the issues faced by our coastal heritage and creating huge challenges for organizations like English Heritage seeking to protect it. Rising sea levels and more regular storms pose a real risk to the future of many of our sites. Tintagel Castle has been inhabited since the late Roman period, but it was not until 12th century that chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth claimed it was where King Arthur was conceived. His mythological account of the history of the kings of Britain, Historia Regum Britanniae, thus cemented the site's place in the national imagination. Passages in Monmouth's book depict how Arthur was conceived at the castle by Uther Pendragon, king of Britain. The king allegedly used magic potion to turn into the Duke Gorlois, not sure, of Cornwall in order to seduce his wife, Queen Igerna. It is thought this racy legend inspired Richard, Earl of Cornwall, to start building a castle there in the 1230s. English Heritage said the site has always battled with erosion, parts of the castle already falling into the sea by the 14th century. but it said recently parts of the cliff directly in front of the visitor center had been lost, affecting the viewing area and the coastal path. It is hoping to raise £40,000 to repair this and the damage caused by the last winter's storms. Other castles considered to be among the most vulnerable to coastal erosion include Bayar's Cove Fort near Dartmouth in Devon, which is built in Tudor times to defend the entrance to the Dart estuary. And here they have a piece of the legend of King Arthur at Tintagel. So why don't we read that too? Chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth claimed that King Arthur was conceived at Tintagel Castle. He wrote the ancient king of Britain, Uther Pendragon, was driven mad with lust for Igerna, the wife of one of his barons, Gorlaw of Cornwall. Gorlaw prudently removed his wife to an impregnable stronghold on the coast, the castle of Tintagel, but then rather less prudently withdrew to another fortress nearby. The pursuing Uther and his men inspected Igerna's refuge and realized that no ordinary attack can succeed, as the castle was surrounded by the sea and there was only one small entry point that soldiers could guard. At this point in history, the prophet, Merlin, proposed a supernatural remedy. By means of a magic potion, he transformed Uther into the exact likeness of Igerna's absent husband. The ruse was entirely successful. The guards of Tintagel allowed him into the castle, and Igerna took him into her bed. And we can imagine what happened afterwards if that was the conception of King Arthur. So why am I bringing this up, actually? You might wonder. And that is because we believe that Lord RayEl, the Messiah, was King Arthur. King Arthur was one of his incarnations. He is, after all, called the once and future king. And if you heard the early videos of Lord RayEl, you might hear that he has a fairly strong Old English accent with these rolling R's and stuff like that. So yeah, just thought this was a bit interesting, a bit sad at the same time that it might be lost to erosion, but such are the ways of the world, things must move on. So thank you all for listening, and check out all the links in the description, and hope to see you soon. Love God and love each other.